there's just so much gratitude left in the end, and that's where you can get to. And I think that's why we share our stories.
Yeah, welcome. I'm so happy to interview today. I told you before, I was so excited because I would listen to your podcast when I was still in recovery, even before I was in recovery. It needed some time for me to finally take the step. And listening to podcasts and watching videos and listening to other people's stories was so helpful for me. And especially since you were always very open about extreme hunger and your body changing and all these topics that many people don't really like to talk about. That was so helpful for me. So thank you for being here and welcome.
That's so nice. Hey, welcome. I'm so glad to hear that. It really makes my heart bloom. I'm really happy because I started my podcast in 2021, and that was when I set the intention to help people who were on the same or very similar path to mine. So yeah, I'm just very happy that you found it to be helpful, and also that you could see that my intentions were coming from a place of trying to be honest and open about topics like extreme hunger, overshoot, and just, also telling people about the facts, like how much I gained, not exact numbers of weight, not to trigger anyone, but just to be open about these things, because that's what I was asking myself back then when I was deep in my recovery. I was like, how are other people doing this? How much did they gain? Not to compare it completely, to me, I knew my body was different, of course, and everybody is different, but I just needed somebody to talk about this, that they were also gaining weight and that they needed it and that it could get better, although it felt so bad. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. So thanks for inviting me to your new podcast.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for being here. And I can 100% relate to what you just said. I was constantly looking for answers, and I think it's very common for people in recovery to try to find answers as to, will I go into overshoot? How long will it take? How much will I gain? How long will it take to overshoot to go away already? And I mean, we all know that there's no answer to that, because as you just said, everybody is different. But I feel even if you won't find the answers that you're looking for, in terms of how long will it take, how much will it be, and stuff like this, it's still very helpful to see other people went through the same thing and it was better. Because if I'm being honest, in the beginning of my recovery, I felt very depressed and I wasn't in a good place. So it was very hard to keep going and to believe in the fact that it will get better. And listening to other people who told the same thing and who told that they felt the same things and that they felt so desperate, but that they also came to a point where it became better, actually made me continue my journey, because there were times where I wanted to go back. But knowing that other people been through that as well and that it's going to be better was so helpful, which is why I'm now starting to tell my story, because that's, it's continuously giving and telling stories. If you feel comfortable with it, do you mind telling your story a little bit to people who don't know you yet?
Of course, and that's what I always wanted to transport too, that stories are what is connecting us as humans. And that's why I'm so happy to hear that you are actually going out into the world sharing your story, and that, people pass it on. It's like a ripple effect, and we're just getting more and more of people being authentic in whatever niche or theme or whatever as well. It's just so important that we are opening up. So that's what I am trying to do by sharing my story. And I can briefly sum it up, although it's been some years, but to keep it short, I got into I mean, I don't even know when it really started. It was a slow process, but when it was the worst, I was 16 when I had anorexia, and later on, couple, I don't know, months or a year later, it's switched or transformed into bulimia, or you could say bulimic anorexic. I'm not really sure about all the diagnoses. I mean, there are so many forms. You can have many variations. It can also be atypical and whatever, and everything's worse or bad, you know, and can cause so much suffering.
Yes.
And I was suffering immensely, especially when I had bulimia, because, you know, I just tried to recover slowly and try to reintegrate my feelings that I had suppressed slowly, but it doesn't really work that way. It's like the extreme hunger kicks in because you have been starving or restricting in some way, no matter what weight you are in. I mean, that's what I experienced with anorexia and bulimia. And the binges started happening, and it was also very emotional, and I was feeling shameful about it. So it's the worst. That's the time when I was in a boarding school for 2 years, the last 2 years of my school career. I went into a boarding school which was only girls. And that made it also very interesting when you had so many girls around you, you know, in various ages, just comparing themselves to each other, especially when they were younger. It started younger and younger. There was one girl in the boarding school, I think she was 10 or 11, and she sat right across the table of me, and she was like eating salad and calling her mom and telling her mom that she was eating spaghetti and that she had eaten enough. And a few weeks later, she was in the hospital. And I mean, she was 11 years old. She was so tiny. She was so tiny, and that just broke my heart. So that's what I observed in people in all ages. And then I went traveling, and that when the extreme hunger really came on, and that's when the overshooting started, and I just went slightly overweight actually for my height and my size. And of course I saw the change, but as I was traveling, also working, but traveling too, I just expanded my mindset and my perspectives changed. Not that you can travel and it's all gonna get better miraculously, but a change of settings and scenery can be quite helpful. There could be a hospital, there could be a new therapy you start, or traveling, like getting out of your comfort zone, right? And then flash forward, at some point it actually got better, and I forget what I had for breakfast, and I forget when I'm gonna have lunch, and I forgot how many calories some foods have. It's just all faded away, which I had never believed could be possible at all, because it was such a norm, like breathing or drinking water for me, you know. So that's where we are now, just a couple years without extreme hunger. I think 4 years or something, but it's still kind of affects me in a way that I am grateful for being able to eat so much now and be fine. And, you know, there's just so much gratitude left in the end, and that's where you can get to. And I think that's why we share our stories.
Yes, 100%. I mean, what you just mentioned about the gratitude is 100% what I'm feeling. Like, it sometimes hits me when I'm like sitting somewhere with my boyfriend or with friends, and we're like ordering something, or somebody offers me something, and I don't even have like a second thought. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like having a slice of pizza or whatever. And like it became so normal, but sometimes it hits me and I'm like, wow, like a couple of years ago this wouldn't have been possible, or I wouldn't have been able to like sit with friends and enjoy the time, because my mind was constantly about food, and like I just couldn't shut down the thoughts. And something you just mentioned that I think is very important, I met so many people, and even like at the beginning of my journey, I wasn't like diagnosed right away, and back then it made me feel very unvalid, and like as if I didn't deserve help because I didn't have like a certain diagnosis. And I know so many people, I talk to so many people, and I feel like for many people who suffer with like disordered eating or like an unhealthy relationship to food, and maybe also movement, a diagnosis is very important, because I feel like for some people it gives the disordered part of them kind of like validation. But at the same time, I see so many similarities in those let's say, different kinds of eating disorders. I mean, most of the binge eating disorders get triggered by starvation. People who, like, some people have like some subtypes or whatever, and I feel like some people still concentrate very much on like a diagnosis instead of validating the fact that as soon as you're struggling with your relationship with food and movement, you are so valid and you are able to get help. Like, you don't need a certain diagnosis. It doesn't matter if it's like anorexia or bulimia or like a subtype or whatever. I feel like if you feel like it has an impact on you and on your mental well-being, you're able to get help. And this is something that I always try to emphasize. When you first started to like try to heal your relationship with food, when you went into extreme hunger, were you aware that that extreme hunger exists and why that is? Like, did you know about it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thanks for asking, because I was not, and nobody told me. And I was also not in therapy. I mean, I already mentioned that at 16, I moved out because of lots of family issues. And I basically had to change like from scratch and move to Munich. And I'm coming from a pretty small town. And so it was a huge change in all areas of my life. And that's when it was like so bad. I wasn't right. And so when the binges started and I was like, oh, this is binge eating. Now I'm just, switching to the third eating disorder in a row. Like, we get anorexia, we get bulimia, and now we're going to binge eating, and then we've got them all, I'm just trying to like take everything with humor because I'd go crazy without it.
Yes.
And yeah. So I was in not binge eating, but extreme hunger, didn't know, was judging myself for it, tried to suppress it. It just got worse and worse and worse. And the big binges happened as soon as I was suppressing it during daytime, especially like waking up and starting to restrict because I had a binge the night before. And that's just, enhancing the cycle of an eating disorder more and more. It was I think that was pretty much why I started my podcast, because it was so impactful that I didn't know. And I wanted to share like as soon as possible with people that this existed, because I hadn't found anything, especially not in the German realm. I didn't even find many studies or any studies at all. I found some in America, actually, that was where the words extreme hunger existed or showed up when I Googled, because I tried to like create scientific podcast episodes and look where science was at. But I feel like it just got so excluded, especially from some professional areas, like people working with patients, that they were just hanging on to the structured plans, meal plans, which is fine. But there's also this thing called extreme hunger, and we need to like inform people about that and what is happening, and mention the starvation studies they did and what can happen to people, and make more studies, maybe also with more females around or people with eating disorders. And that is actually what we need. And it made me just so angry and passionate that I started to talk about it on and on and on, but in the German realm. So it's great that you're doing this in the English realm.
I love that you're actually using the fact that you're seeing a lack, and that it makes you kind of like angry that you're seeing a lack of information, and like to use that and turn it into, well, I'm going to create my own information. And I 100% agree. Like, most of the information I got, except for like actually your podcast, were in the English room, like either from the UK or from America. And I felt like we should talk about it so much more. I have some friends who work in like healthcare. A friend of mine is a psychologist, and she was like, we actually learned stuff about eating disorders in college, but we never learned about the things that you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
We never learned about extreme hunger. We never learned about overshoot weight. We never learned about the physical background of eating disorders, about hormonal imbalance, and like there are so many things that have an impact. And I feel like people tend to rationalize eating disorders a lot, like as well people in the healthcare system as also like people who have an eating disorder. You mentioned earlier that you tried to like incorporate your feelings again and like slowly, you know, getting better. And I don't know about you, but I was always like very aware of my eating disorder. I always like intellectualized it. Like I tried to find out, like I went to therapy. I wanted to find out why I just like why I had it. I was, you know, I read so many stuff about, I read studies, but as long as I didn't want to make a change, nothing happened because I understood everything and I tried to intellectualize like my feelings and my disorder and my habits, but I didn't really change anything. So I feel like this is something that we also see a lot in people who suffer from like an unhealthy relationship to eating and movement, like the intellectualizing side of it. And am I right? You're also can you tell me a little bit about what you study at the moment?
I'm studying sports and nutrition. I'm almost finished, like soon I'm done, which is also because I dealt with all of these things and also gut issues and all of that. And that's why I decided to study that one.
That's amazing. So how was it for you? How was your relationship to sports and movement before you had an eating disorder, during your eating disorder, and then like also afterwards? How did it change?
Yeah,
How did it feel?
that's a good one. Yeah. And also because of what you previously said, I just wanted to mention that I just thought about the word disorder. So it's like unstructured. There's so much chaos, and people always try to structure everything and put people in boxes, and that's what gives them a feeling of control. And I believe that us looking for some rational reasons and analyzing, like structuring everything, like putting things apart of each other to understand why something was disordered within us, I think that's actually just makes sense because that's how we operated in school. That's what we got taught, and that's what you do with with like a chaos, right? But there's a very important part missing, which is the emotional part, and that's also what I saw. There was this extreme hunger theme that was missing, and the emotional theme. And the emotional theme is actually key because that's where you are at the core. And if you don't look at that, you can have all the meal plans and understand where it's coming from. I'm not sure if you're just gonna shift to another addiction like I did for some time. Substances addictions, whatever it is that gives you release, or sports addiction. And that's where that theme comes in, right? Perfect. Sports was just the new thing. That's where it just, went. That desire for release and distraction. And that was something that I got like acknowledged for. People thought it was amazing. I was even deciding to study sports, which I had never thought in my life. Like in school times, I was never one of the best in that subject. You can do anything, right? But I was just like, okay, that's my new thing. That's my identity. And the identity shift is just something you grasp on. I mean, think about it. When you think about identity, there's been wars that have been started from trying to keep identities and being proud of some land or some personality you are and not wanting to lose that. So that's just this rational desire for control, putting everything in boxes and having an identity that you can cling on. And everything else, the unknown, was just unsafe. Change was unsafe, especially after what happened with moving out at 16 and feeling so rocky on the ground, basically, so shaky. Yeah, so sport gave me something to hold on to for a while. But it didn't work out long because my body was just, it was just done. It was just, we went for a run, and I started bawling my eyes out in the middle of a park in Munich. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I can't do sports anymore. It just doesn't work, right? And so I had a huge break of any sports except for going for walks and hiking in New Zealand when I went traveling. But there was no energy. There was no energy anymore. I just suddenly felt what I had done to my body. It all just came up, and not just the feelings, but also the body aches and thyroid issues and gut issues. And like it all started, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Yeah. So that's when I stopped doing sports, and then I reintroduced it a couple years later via yoga, Pilates, just very light sports that made me feel into my body in order to gain a completely new perspective on sports. Because before it was just like about the aesthetics and hitting the goals. But now I approached it from going within and then moving without and doing the
Wow, I love
things,
it.
moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a completely new approach. Also prioritizing health.
Yes.
Yeah.
So did you have to take a long break from sports in order to like finally
Yeah.
get a good relationship with sports again?
Multiple years. And
Yeah.
I'm a very stubborn person. If I feel trapped in anything, like an addiction or something that tries to restrict me or control me, I'll just do whatever it takes to to let loose. And that's what got me out of extreme hunger, out of my eating disorder, and out of the sports addiction, and also kept me going during this break of doing sport.
During my whole eating disorder, I would walk a lot, like insanely much. And I always had this urge to walk. Like I always had this inner feeling of like of stress, like of unsettlement. Like I never felt calm. And when I like started recovery and my body started aching, like it started with like a lot of water retention. I put on weight very quickly and everything hurt. And I was so frustrated because I thought now that I'm eating more, it should get better, not worse. But it actually meant my body was hurting so badly that I barely could move, which actually saved me. But the first couple of weeks it was so hard to enter because I still had like this inner feeling of I have to move. Like I was constantly under stress and I felt like the only thing that would help me was moving. And so like sitting it out and like sitting with a feeling, trying to like just, sit still was very helpful for me. But I think it's very interesting to see how many things have to move in extremes in order to get normal again. We just talked about your experience with extreme hunger, which I also went through and which many other people are going through. So oftentimes if we like restrict for a very long time, we have to go through a phase of extreme hunger, however long that takes. Like it's so different for each person. But in order to find balance again, and in order to like find balance with sports and movement again, we might have to stop moving or like working out completely for a while in order to like develop a healthy relationship again. But I think the fact that it is possible and that you don't have to live your whole life with this like black and white thinking, like for me it was always the feeling of, okay, I will either have to diet my whole life or I will eat all the time, or I will have to stop working out completely, or I will have to work out multiple times a day. And like noticing now that this is not the case, that I can have like a balance is great.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes it just has to get worse before it gets better, I guess. That's what
100%.
I noticed in so many areas of my life. Things are crashing down, and I'm like, what? I've been manifesting the opposite. And that's because everything's purging out from the old system, basically. And then it just flush it out, and then you can come in and you receive. And that's also what I had to learn a lot, not just giving, also receiving, taking things in and letting myself take in instead of, purging it out again. That's something that is also happening on an like emotional level or energetic, no matter how you spell it or say it. And that's such a huge teaching, and I think you can be so proud of you that you are actually not pushing through, because that would be like the same thing we did in the eating disorder, pushing through, going harder, getting thinner, whatever, but like flowing through, you could say.
Yeah, that's a very good expression, actually.
Surrendering.
Very good. Yes, surrender is actually one of the words that had like such a big meaning, especially in the last few years for me. I was actually thinking of getting a tattoo with surrender just to like remind myself of it.
Amazing.
So yeah, that's a very, very good expression.
Cool.
When you were in the depth of your eating disorder, did you experience body dysmorphia? Like, did you see yourself different, like in the mirror, on pictures? And if so, how did you like work through it in recovery? And did it change? And if so, when did it change?
Yes, and that is something that came up recently again, which was very interesting. And I think we can be humble enough to just be like, okay, it comes back, and not be like, I thought I was over this. I think sometimes the ego can get so loud, like, just accept it. There's something else it's going to teach you, invite it in. So I was like, okay, body image problems, let's hang out. What is it this time? And they were like, well, you don't really see your body like how it really is. And that was also an emotional, mental thing, not seeing myself how I really am, not expressing myself how I really am. For example, I would love to make, as I'm just talking, content in English, but I'm forcing myself to do it all in German because that's how I've always done it, right? And I can't change, and I can't do it both, all these limitations, black and white again. And so what was the question again? Oh my god, I got lost again.
Don't worry. We were talking about like body dysmorphia.
Yeah, the body dysmorphia. Yeah, and I'm recording myself a lot, doing social media. That is a very interesting process that happens there. Yeah. I'm looking in the mirror every day, and I just noticed, okay, I'm having these depressed phases still. I'm like depression and anxiety are still in my life. No matter if the eating disorder is gone, it's still happening. And I believe it was also some of the origins of my eating disorder, like the anxiety. And now I'm dealing with it otherwise. And so I saw myself recently different on images if my mood was bad. And if my mood was better, I saw myself like I had a very good body image actually. And I was like, okay, this is not normal. That I just believed it back in the day. I just believed what I saw in the mirror. But now I can see, no, I don't have to believe it. I'm in a bad mood. Of course I'm having a bad a body image day, and I can just accept it and move on because I know deep down, and that is what I didn't have before, that I do actually love my essence and my core. And that is giving me just the safety that no matter how I see myself in the mirror, no matter if I have a good mood or a bad mood, that part of me is always there. And I can always, I focus on it so much. And that's a lot of work and a lot of layers to, dissolve. But when you have it, it's always there. I don't know if you've experienced that too.
I actually did, yes. And I mean, first of all, this is so precious. Like the fact that you're able to notice it and that you're able to remind yourself who you are at your core and that you like that person. And I know that this is not always very simple. It's always easier said than done, right? Especially if we're like in a very bad place, if we're having a very bad day, it's not that easy. But I definitely had like huge body dysmorphia. Like when I was at a very low weight, I didn't see myself the way I was. Like I saw myself also like differently on pictures and in the mirror. When I would look in the mirror, I saw myself bigger than on pictures. And when I like actually gained weight, I didn't have the false sense of safety anymore that I had when I was in my eating disorder, because when I still was in my eating disorder, I could remind myself of a certain number that I saw on the scale. And that like fell apart when I actually gained weight. So then I didn't have the security of, oh, maybe I see myself differently. But in the end, I was so tired of like basically starving myself and like hurting myself, and like my whole personality changed during my eating disorder, and that I just saw that as like my only way. I was like, I just have to work through it because there is no other way. I don't want to continue living the life that I lived for 10 years. And I mean, I still have that. Like on some days I look in the mirror, I look at pictures and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can work with it. And on other days I'm actually very down because of what I see in the mirror or on pictures. But I'm also starting to notice that oftentimes it has to do with like underlying feelings. If I had like a stressful day, I also like suffer a lot from anxiety, and it actually came up after my eating disorder. I'm like just now noticing that I struggled with anxiety my whole life. I just never was aware of the fact that this is anxiety. I actually had phases where I was like, oh, my heart is like racing all the time. That's funny. I literally didn't know that this was anxiety. So when I'm like super anxious, when I have a lot of stress, when I'm like very much in my head all the time, these are the days when I actually feel worse about myself. And I mean, sometimes I don't really see the reason. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I had a good day. Why, But I feel like up to a certain point, this is also normal. I feel like most people have days where they are just not feeling great. I think it's very important to learn that we don't have to concentrate too much on it, and we don't have, for instance, the picture that we see or what we see in the mirror doesn't have to destroy our whole day. It doesn't have to, set the mood for the next week. And sometimes this is very hard to like actually step back and not letting that like tear you down too much. Like, it's again easier said than done. But I feel like during recovery, and especially like after recovery, my life has so much more things to look forward to and so much more purpose, so many more things that I actually didn't do when I was in my eating disorder, that these thoughts actually don't have as much space anymore because there are like so many other things in my life. There's just not enough space to like worry about my body all the time.
Yeah, exactly. That is why it took such a long break from creating content, actually, because there was also a lot going on with heartbreak and whatever, but also because I just needed distance from all of this content about eating disorders and food and bodies, because I just needed to distance myself a little bit. And then I could come back from another place also towards social media and creating, which is another subject. But yeah, and that's sometimes super helpful. That's true. Yeah.
100%. I just have a couple more questions for you. One question is, how did your environment react when you, like, during your eating disorder and also when you were in recovery, like friends, family, and however they reacted? Was that helpful, or was that maybe sometimes triggering?
Well, my environment and the people around me at the time when I was in the boarding school, I was actually able to isolate myself quite a bit because there were no parents. On the weekends, there were just 7, 8 students in the whole building, and I had a whole floor and toilet to myself, which caused binges and purges and all of these things. I just didn't really have an issue with getting noticed, or people didn't really worry because I got there at 16 and stayed there until 18. So it was just 2 years and the people didn't really know me that much. And I wouldn't tell many people. There was one person I told in the beginning of going to the boarding school, and that was kind of not a good choice because that person just didn't have the capacity. She had a lot to do. She had a lot of things on her mind, and I was just putting it on top, and it was too much and overwhelming, and she bursted into tears. And now I wouldn't tell anyone where I noticed that because we were having deep talks, and I was like, oh, finally I can talk about it, I can open up. But we were also having deep talks where she was talking 80% of the time and I was listening to all of her things. So be very mindful who you tell first, especially because that was the reason why I didn't tell anybody else for years. I think the first person I told was my first boyfriend when the extreme hunger was almost over. And I mean, yeah, so I went through it pretty much alone and, watching some content I found. And that's not what I recommend because it really lengthens the time you have it. And but it was my journey, I guess. I mean, it has pros and cons because on the pro side, I was very much responsible. I took the responsibility for myself very early on. And I wasn't like, oh, if I get sick, somebody's going to care about me, which was a theme for me because of some attachment trauma I experienced. So there was nobody. And I was on the floor and I knew, okay, if I continue on, I might die.
Yeah.
Pretty realistic. Trigger warning. I'm not going to talk about that dark subject, but that was a wake-up call, and that's what I needed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's different for everybody, but I can't really tell you a lot about how did my environment react because I was a lone wolf in this.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, as you just said, that probably makes it way harder and it might extend the length. I mean, it's different for everyone, but this is actually something I imagine this must be very, very hard. One last question I have is you mentioned thyroid problems, stomach problems, and stuff like this before. How did you cope with the way your body reacted, like during your eating disorder and maybe also like during recovery? And were you able to like get some professional help? How did you cope with it? And did it eventually become better?
Yeah, I didn't notice or I didn't know for a very long time that I had thyroid issues. I was just used to being always tired or like not being hungry anymore. I thought there was a symptom just of my eating disorder because I lost all signs of being hungry, like physically hungry. Mentally, I was always hungry, but physically hungry and also satiated. But the thyroid came up when I had a doctor's appointment during the extreme hunger phase. And he actually tested my blood. And that's when we found out that I have a slight thyroid. Oh my gosh.
Hypothyroid? Yeah.
I think, yeah. And that's why I got some medication for that. So that's when it got better. But for a while, I actually didn't want to take the medication because I felt like it was making me more nervous again and more like awake. And then we had to adapt the doses and then it worked. So that's how I dealt with that. But during the extreme phase of having sports addiction and anorexia, I didn't really notice to be that tired for a long time. It was like my body was suppressing all signs of being very tired or just hungry or whatever because I was in fight or flight constantly just trying to survive, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. And do you still take the thyroid medication or did it balance itself out?
Yeah, I still take it, but I'm planning on trying to also try some alternative methods in the future after I quit uni and earn some money in order to afford these kind of helps, I'm not planning on just taking the medication, not trying, but if nothing works, then I might figure it out and do the Western road.
Yeah.
The Western road.
Yeah.
No.
And did what you just mentioned, the doctor's visits, did you ever feel not seen by a doctor, or did you ever feel like somebody would not understand what you went through?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I didn't really talk with them about the eating disorder I had with the doctors. I was just talking about my physical symptoms, but in regards of psychiatrist, I was going to one because of some medication for depression and anxiety, and she wasn't really taking me seriously because I was just always very put together. I actually had a very low day today, but then I can just be very happy if something excites me, like an interview, and it's not pretending anymore. But back in the day, I was just pretending a lot, like all the time, and nothing was actually exciting me because I had no energy anymore to be excited at all, because pretending was just such an effort.
Yes.
And so, especially if someone asks you, how are you really doing? It was almost like this part of me just switched on. It was like, I'm fine. Everything's so good. You know?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. And so she was like, well, you don't look like a depressed person. You're not like my usually depressed patients. And I was like,
wow.
Well, but it was just quite desperate within, and I knew how to take myself seriously at that point. It was just 3 years ago, I think. And I was like, okay, I'm not gonna leave this room before I get any help. And that was just what I promised myself. And it was like, I'm gonna lay down on this floor, and I'm not gonna leave this room until she helps me, you know?
That's amazing. No, that's actually how it should be.
Yeah. And sometimes you just gotta believe how bad it is for you, and you're the one suffering at home in bed when you don't have your makeup put on and your hair styled and you don't look put together. And that's when this person should be there and be like, oh, I see, but they're not. And you got this part of you maybe that is the the workaholic, or the one who's always productive, or the one who's always kind, which can be great things, but if they're just too intense, they're kind of like a coping mechanism and mask you put on. So that's how I learned the hard way to sometimes just let the mask slip, or just don't need them at all anymore, which is a process, and I don't judge myself for having them, and sometimes even putting them on still. But there we are.
I feel
How
like
was it for you?
Well, I definitely had people, like in the beginning of my eating disorders, I was not as severely underweight. So I had a male doctor telling me that everything is fine and that I should not worry, which actually triggered me into showing him that it's not fine. Which, I mean, looking back at it, it was, of course, it was not a healthy way. Like, back then I didn't really learn how to communicate what I really felt, because that was often dismissed in my childhood. So for me, using my body as a way to show how and like what a bad place I was the only way I saw back then. And then the thing is, like, during my eating disorder, people often saw the severity, which of course maybe was a little bit helpful, but at the same time it like led to the fact that I didn't want to let go, because I was like, okay, now people see how much I'm suffering, but what if I like gain weight and I'm still suffering and nobody will take me serious again? And this actually happened. I talked to a therapist like shortly after I started gaining weight, and like I started my recovery journey, when like all this anxiety and like very, very severe period of depression came up. And she was clearly not very familiar with the whole subject of like people with like an unhealthy relationship to food and movement. So her number one suggestion was sports. She was like, studies have shown that sports is great for depression, so I think you should work out every day. And I was like literally in a phase where I really needed a long break from sports, which I then did. But when I told her that, she was like, oh no, that's just your depression speaking. Like, you need to work out every day. And she made me feel guilty about not working out. And she also told me that she doesn't believe that I really had an eating disorder, because she didn't see me when I looked different, let's put it that way. She saw me after I started to gain weight. And she said she didn't believe me because she's never heard of a case where somebody would recover without going to, like, without being inpatient. Which is bullshit. I mean, like, going inpatient can be a great way for many people. It can be very, very helpful, and every person has their own way. But there are also many people who are actually able to recover without going to a clinic or without going to a hospital. And I mean, I knew that I had problems before. It just showed me that you really need to find someone you can work with. And after that, I like found a great therapist that I was working with for like 1.5 years. And he was amazing. He like, it's just so different. And sometimes and then also I found an MD, like another doctor, and she was amazing. But it's sad how big the impact of professionals can be. Because, like, the two people I just talked about, like the male doctor and the psychologist, who like dismissed the severity of my feelings, not just only of my body and of in what a bad place I was, but also of my inner world, that like had such a big impact on me and like took away my motivation to wanting to recover. But when I started to work with people who are actually listening, that was the big part. They were actually listening and trying to understand. That was so helpful. So I know that it's like very privileged and that not everyone lives in a country where there's like universal healthcare. And even in Germany, it can be so hard to like find a good psychologist, and sometimes we have to wait so long. But if people are able to, I would suggest trying to find doctors and like psychologists that you really feel comfortable with, like people that really see you and listen to you, because that has such a big impact.
Yeah, I also did 3 different therapies after having an eating disorder because of the root issues coming up. Let's say it's not like you quit the disordered eating, which is, I mean, a process in itself, and then everything's so great and you're amazing. You're doing amazing in every way. Stuff comes up exactly at the right time, and at that time I was just healthy enough and things still came up. Anxiety came up and depression came up, and that's when the therapies were actually very, very helpful, but I had to try 3 different therapists to find the right one.
Yes.
And 3 different styles also, one group therapy to one-on-one therapies. So sometimes it's a process. And I mean, we're very privileged in Germany that we get like we get it financed by our insurance. I didn't have to pay anything, which is just such a privilege for a certain amount of hours. But I also agree that if I could do it again, I would get a therapist immediately, and I would try many therapists and just stop when I found the right one, and not just be like, oh, she's right just because she studied. I mean, I've studied now and I don't know everything about nutrition and everything about sports. So just be open, I guess.
100%. And I mean, it can be very like energy draining to have to look for a therapist. And sometimes it feels like, oh, I finally found someone who has an opening, so let's make that work. But if it doesn't work, I think it's best for everyone to like continue looking for someone who's like really, who feels right.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add, or you would like to say to people who might be in the process at the moment, or even like thinking about trying recovery, but don't feel sure, or maybe aren't sure if they even have like an eating disorder? Is there anything you would like to say?
Yeah, totally. Of course. I love talking. Hence why I have a podcast and do social media. So I wanted to say, first thing I wanted to mention was that I recently listened to 2 podcast episodes by Glennon Doyle. We Can Do Hard Things is the podcast, and it was with Richard Schwartz, who is a doctor, I think a psychiatrist, and he developed IFS, internal family systems, which is a very interesting method. And in the podcast episode, he actually mentions that he was working with eating disorder patients in the beginning of his work, and that's why he started to apply or even develop this method. And I believe that, so in the episode, he's actually doing this with Glennon, who is suffering from an eating disorder and is in recovery. So that might quite interesting. And I thought that it's so interesting because the idea is that you consist of many parts. And although I believe that it's very important to find unity within in the end, but in order to do that, you need to reintegrate some parts you split off because of trauma or whatever it was. That's inner child work. But he's actually talking to different parts, and he's not like telling the eating disorder part, you're bad, which is what so many psychiatrists and psychologists approach therapy with, which is understandable because the eating disorder is hurting the body, right? But he's talking to it and being like, what have you been protecting this person from? What's your purpose? And actually going and interacting with this protection mechanism. And I think that's a very interesting approach, because you don't have to put your defense mechanisms up, and you can just let this part of you talk and express why it's there, what it's protecting. Then you go to the parts you actually exile, you split it off, and you reintegrate them and do all of these processes, which then can heal you as a whole. And that's just what I think is very important, besides the topics of when, what, how much to eat, in what order, and extreme hunger. That's also a very valid level that we really need to heal. But also don't neglect the emotional parts, which might come later when you're more stable in a physical sense, because right now you can just think about food, which is totally understandable. But I can just say that after I stopped being in this eating disorder, I just tried to push it all away and was like, oh no, I'm fine, right? So it's just find a method that's working for you. I just wanted to give this little tip as one approach that might help, and that's just what I felt called to mention. And anything else, just that keep going. It's possible. We are living proof of that, and we are sharing this with you for a reason, because we want to inspire you to do it not the same, but your way. And in the end, you'll learn from this, you'll grow from this if you choose to do so, because you're not staying stagnant. You're deciding or choosing to grow and to change from that. And I believe that everyone is capable of doing that.
Wow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And that was deep. That was very good. It was a very good word to end it with. So for everyone who's like interested, like to see more of you, to see more of your journey and of your, whatever you create. I saw you have a TikTok account, you have an Instagram account. I think you also have a YouTube account. And I think they are all under the same name, right?
Yeah, One Scoop of Sunshine.
Yeah. I will put that in the notes for sure. And thank you
thanks.
so much for this interview. It was a blast. And thank you so much for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, for being open, and for doing the work that you're doing. And I can't wait to see whatever else comes up.
Yeah, I'm also excited. Thanks for inviting me. This was so much fun.
It was so much fun. Thank you.